The girl put her hand down her throat, and the next second, she kept rummaging through the vomit until she found a memory card inside. The man in front of her, driven by his professionalism, quickly wiped the card clean and inserted it into a computer for reading. However, he was soon shocked by the data inside. It contained indisputable evidence of international drug lords' crimes. As it turned out, just moments ago, this 10-year-old girl had witnessed her parents being brutally killed by the henchmen of the notorious drug lord. And 10 minutes before the tragedy unfolded, Fabio, a trusted lieutenant of the drug lord, had realized he was abandoned. In a desperate act, he entrusted his daughter Catalea with a storage card, informing her that it was her passport. Fabio also wrote a small note with instructions, guiding her on what to do in case of trouble, ensuring her survival. After handing over the card, Fabio gave Catalea his protective amulet just before the drug lord's henchmen arrived. When the henchmen stormed in, they started a massacre. Fabio and his wife bravely tried to fight back, but were quickly killed, being no match for the henchmen. The leader of the henchmen, Marco, asked Catalea gently about the location of the hidden storage card. It was then that Catalea learned from Marco's words that the order to kill her father had come from the international drug lord, Louis. When Marco asked Catalea what she wanted, Catalea grabbed a knife from under the table and stabbed it.
To kill Don Luis!
She then escaped through the restroom window. Then Catalea jumped to the next step. This is where the arriving man fired his gun without mercy. Catalea swallowed the memory card. Taking advantage of a momentary lapse by the pursuers to reload their guns, Catalea jumped to the ground below. The group of men continued their relentless pursuit. In a desperate move, Catalea took refuge in a nearby sewer. Now, Marco's speechless. Escaping as instructed by Fabio's small note, Catalea made her way to the U.S. Embassy and handed over the storage card to the officials there. Recognizing the importance of the data, the embassy staff protected her and brought her to the United States. However, once in the U.S., Catalea took advantage of a restroom break to escape through the window again. Then Catalea went to the address that her father had left in a note. After many inquiries, Catalea arrived at the address and found her uncle Emilio, a gangster. Emilio was overjoyed to see Catalea still alive, and as he hugged her, the stoic Catalea couldn't hold back her tears.
It's okay. You're safe now. You're safe. You're safe.
The next day, after finally getting a good night's sleep, Catalea found her grandmother waiting in the kitchen, having prepared breakfast for her. Surprisingly, Catalea started questioning Emilio about becoming an assassin, and, to his surprise, he agreed to teach her. Emilio immediately arranged for Catalea to get an education, but she was unhappy with the idea of attending school. Convinced that it wouldn't teach her to be an assassin, Emilio, instead of arguing, took out a gun and started shooting wildly, causing panic among the crowd. He used this opportunity to show Catalea that to be a successful assassin, she needed to understand how the world works, learn psychology, and more, all of which she could only achieve through education. Finally convinced, Catalea picked up her school bag once again. Her journey of vengeance had officially begun. 15 years had passed. As a grown-up Catalea made her entrance, she accidentally collided with a police car. In a drunken state, she stumbled out of the car, and police wasted no time in taking her to the station. The police decided to detain Catalea overnight and let her sleep off the effects of alcohol. Little did they know that she had intentionally feigned intoxication. She was there to carry out an assassination. Right after that, Catalea went into drag. Dressed in a black, tight-fitting suit, she picked the lock and opened the cell door. Moving the overhead camera out of view, Catalea went unnoticed by the police officer on duty, who was engrossed in reading the newspaper. Catalea made her way to the water area, where she obtained a cup of water and a spoon. Then, she entered the electrical room. Opening the electrical box, Catalea carefully set up a makeshift device. Catalea set up the spoon first, then bit a small hole in a cup before placing it in the electrical box as well. With her preparations complete, Catalea climbed up into the ventilation duct. As she reached a fan, she took out her watch and began the countdown. Catalea just counted to 0. True to her calculation, the spoon fell and triggered a short circuit.
Hey Doyle, go check the ventilation system.
Causing the cup to fly out and the fan lost power. Catalea swiftly crossed over the fan. At that moment, the police officer arrived to check the electrical box. Meanwhile, Catalea had reached a critical moment. After discovering that it was just a normal power outage, the police paid no attention and restored power to the electrical box. The next second, the fan resumed operation, but Catalea had already passed through. Seeing the cup on the floor, the police officer thought nothing of it and threw it into the trash. Meanwhile, Catalea had already arrived at the toilet and then kicked a police officer who had just gone to the toilet to stun him. Catalea then used the cop to get to the location where the first-class prisoners were being held. Taking the police officer's gun, she approached her target and shot him 3 times, killing him instantly. The sound of gunshots alarmed all the other police officers who rushed to the scene. As a result, when they arrived at the scene, they only found a body covered in patterns painted by Catalea. At this point, Catalea is back in the air ducts, and the police began a full-scale inspection. Catalea had already planned her escape route and successfully reached the outer perimeter of the building. Climbing up to the rooftop, she then entered the ventilation system, making her way back to her cell. By the time the police got here, Catalea was back to her old self, asleep. Yes, under Emilio's guidance, Catalea had become a professional assassin. The next day, after finishing her statement, Catalea was released. Afterwards, Emilio brought a new assassination target, a fraudster who had embezzled 50 billion. Catalea opened the magazine that contained the reward for this mission. In the past few years, Emilio received the assignments and Catalea carried out the assassinations. As Catalea was about to leave, Emilio showed her a newspaper. The headline displayed her work. It was about the 22 bodies, all marked with the same pattern. Emilio learned that the police had released the information in hopes of gathering clues to decipher the pattern's meaning. To Emilio's dismay, he realized that Catalea had left the same pattern on the 22 people she had assassinated over the past 4 years. This angered Emilio because such behavior clearly pointed the police towards a serial killer, greatly increasing the risk of exposure. Catalea, however, had a reason for her actions. 15 years ago, when she handed over the storage card, the U.S. authorities failed to apprehend Lewis. Instead, he used internal drug cartel intelligence to secure protection from the CIA, hiding in plain sight. And now, the flower pattern on the body is exactly the code name of the drug lord power that Lewis was once a part of. Catalea was using the FBI's resources to find Lewis. Emilio tries to stop Catalea, but in the end, Emilio has no choice but to compromise. That night, Catalea began another assassination mission assigned by Emilio. Catalea arrives at a luxury mansion and manages to get to the inside of the mansion through a shark tank. Then Catalea easily found her target, William, the fraudster who took away $50 billion. Soon, William noticed something unusual and was abruptly awakened. His body was now covered in patterns, leaving him frightened as he searched for his bodyguards, only to find them dead. Armed with a pistol, William braved his fear and headed to the main hall. At that moment, Catalea finally appeared. William wasted no time and immediately fired his gun, but to his surprise, there were no bullets in it. Immediately after toying with William, Cartland pulled out his gun and sent him into the crocodile's stomach. In no time, William's death also made headlines. The situation escalated, and Ross from the FBI got wind of a unique Colombian orchid being associated with the killings. However, when he tried to search for more information internally, he discovered that the CIA had classified the data. In an effort to solve the case, Ross promptly called the CIA, requesting access to the information. But the CA, fearful of exposing their involvement, quickly hung up on him. Then a pissed-off CI went straight to Lewis and told him to get it over with. Lewis dispatched Marco to eliminate Catalea once again. As Marco arrived in the US, he began inquiring about all the Colombians living in the city. The next day, Emilio was furious when he found Catalea. 8 Colombians were murdered in the city the day before, including one of Emilio's friends, a clear sign that Lewis had traced the news back to them. Seeing Catalea's indifferent expression, Emilio was truly angered. To ensure Catalea's safety, he decided to cut ties with her and put an end to all assassination work. Emilio left without looking back. Meanwhile, Ross continued to gather clues, gradually narrowing down the killer to Catalea's identity. Eventually, he successfully located her position. The SWAT team was mobilized, and at the same time, Marco found Emilio. Back at her home, Catalea received the warning, and indeed, the SWAT team had arrived at her doorstep. Swiftly, she turned on the shower and ran out. Then Catalea ran from the 11th floor to the 6th floor to the spare room she had prepared beforehand. The man inside looked bewildered and was knocked unconscious by Catalea. She then retrieved the sniper rifle hidden in the bathroom. Then Catalea planted the explosives on the wall and hastily withdrew and waited for them. When the special forces used the bomb to break down Catalea's 11th floor door, Catalea synchronized the explosives. With that, Katrin blew through the wall connecting the 6th floor lift. When the SWAT team searched the 11th floor, they found nothing. Ross immediately ordered a lockdown of the building. Meanwhile, Catalea used the elevator cable to descend to the underground parking garage. Once there, she destroyed 2 surveillance cameras and swiftly made her way into a ventilation duct, skillfully evading the search efforts of the SWAT team. Unbeknownst to them, the building's ventilation system was connected to the subway tunnel. Catalea effortlessly made her escape. Afterward, Catalea arrived at Emilio's house intending to inform him about the recent events. However, she immediately sensed something was amiss as she found a smoked cigar in the smoke. Free home. With her gun drawn, Catalea cautiously advanced into the house. To her horror, Catalea discovered her worst nightmare. Her grandmother had been mercilessly killed. Then Catalea searched for Emilio, and sure enough, Emilio was killed without exception. After her family was killed, Catalea finally regretted her actions. This event completely enraged her, and she decided to take the initiative. That night, Catalea went directly to the home of Officer Ross, who was investigating her case. Ross appeared composed at first, pointing out the numerous cameras around him as a deterrent. Yet, Catalea surprised him by revealing a pile of dismantled cameras, leaving Ross dumbfounded. She then informed him that the chair he was sitting on had a pressure-triggered bomb, and any movement would be fatal. Ross is speechless. Then Catalea told Ross all about why she killed and left the pattern. And then Catalea asked Ross to help her find Lewis, who was being protected by the CIA. But just as Ross was about to say, there was nothing he could do. Catalea took Ross's family photo and started threatening him. Ross was speechless. The next day, Ross made his way to the CIA. But Richard at the CIA despised Ross and kicked him out. That's when Catalea called. Then Catalea started to warn Richard through Ross's mouth. If Richard doesn't tell us where Lewis is, Catalea will use Richard's flesh and blood to redecorate his office. Sure enough, a red dot appeared on Richard's body in the next second, but Richard still pretended to be calm and said it was bulletproof glass. When Catalea heard that, she fired a shot without hesitation and accurately blew up the head of the photo. This time, Richard was completely shocked and gave out the address. At last, Catalea warned Richard not to inform Louis and hung up the phone. Soon, Catalea arrived at her base to prepare her equipment. After checking her gear, Catalea got in her truck and set out for revenge. At night, Catalea got the floor plan of Louis' villa. The next day, Marco led a group of his men in deploying a defense against Catalea. But just then. But Louis, the drug lord, saw what looked like a big guy flying over. After a violent explosion, not a single person was killed. Marco saw the situation and told his men to get the car and evacuate the area. The next second, Catalea drove her truck in and stopped it. Then Catalea got out and shot at the car. Marco hid Louis in a hidden compartment. Catalea used the floor plan to sneak under the floor. Catalea sees someone coming from above and starts shooting again. Marco countered with a grenade. Then, one of his men started shooting with a machine gun and moved forward to confirm whether she was dead or not. When he saw no movement from below, Marco thought Catalea was dead, but in the next second, there were other gunshots. Cartland came to the second floor with 2 guns in hand. Marco was hiding behind a pillar, shivering, and his men were all killed in no time. When Catalea changed guns, Marco finally rushed out. There was only one of Marco's men left. As soon as Marco entered the toilet, there were gunshots from outside, and Marco realized that the last of his men was also dead. In this small space, Marco was ready for a close combat. The next second, Catalea opens the door and walks in. The battle between the two is imminent. Catalea has been waiting for this moment for a long time. Years of training have given Catalea the upper hand. Marco couldn't beat Catalea, so he picked up his pistol. Catalea didn't even give Marco a chance to shoot. She just unloaded the magazine, removed the gun, and plunged it into Marco's neck. After killing Marco, Catalea was slightly relieved. On the other side of the room, Louis sensed something was wrong and ran out while Catalea was taking care of Marco. Louis got into a car and hurriedly started to run away from his villa. Meanwhile, Catalea had just come out, but she was in no hurry at all. She used Marco's mobile phone to call Louis. Meanwhile, Louis, who had managed to escape, became arrogant once again. He told Catalea that she would be his prey from now on, and that he would find an opportunity to kill her from the shadows. Catalea received the threat, but she did not care about it because everything was under her control. Sure enough, Louis found two hounds hiding in the backseat of the car. At Catalea's command, the two hounds tore Louis apart. Hearing the screams on the phone, Catalea realized that she had finally succeeded in feeding her enemy to the dogs. Finally, Catalea put on her sunglasses and got on the bus to start her lonely journey.